Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com. I'm really pleased to be here today with Domo Baal at her gallery. Domo, hello. It's lovely to see you and this wonderful Graham Crowley exhibition, and I've just been interviewing Graham. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your space, the gallery, and you know how it all came together.
The gallery's interesting question. It's 25 years old virtually, so almost a quarter of a century.
Check it out, that's fantastic.
Doesn't make sense in a world that makes even less sense. Whether the present or the past, therefore giving one total freedom because nothing makes sense. And Graham's show is a particular privilege and also a huge amount of fun. And it is called light fiction. It should be subtitled At Last, because we've known each other for quite a while, and I've known his work for many years and worked tangentially around his practice, both as a teacher, because I represent a few people who and have done in the past who have either been taught by him or indeed taught with him at the RCA. So there's a multi-generation kind of crossover, and also with practice and all of that kind of thing. And so I've known his work for ages, helped with some group shows, and then all of a sudden he goes and does this.
And it's like, wow.
And well, it's not all of a sudden, but it's I mean, you know, on a very, this is not a painter who has ever not painted, nor has he ever dabbled in different artistic practices. He leaves that to motorbikes and things like that. And he has consistently painted, always, and also been very generous in showing his work and inviting other artists to see, and running a lot of artist-run collaborative things. So the painting has been very accessible, the subject and the practice. And roughly about 2 years ago, whether we can thank COVID for that extra focus that some of us have been allowed to kind of like wallow in, or not. You know, and all of that. Somehow, for me, what has changed in his work is, first of all, none of the subjects. I mean, the subjects are him. They are his life. They are. I don't know about his life, but definitely what he is engaged with. The presence of workshops, work. They're not all one workshop. They're not all his.
Some are his son's workshop and things
some
like
are his son's workshop, some are his workshop, some are. It's more to do with his kind of thinking space. And I sense, I have no idea whether that's true, but for me, I sense you know, whatever the subject is never really the subject of a painting. It's more what allows you a way in. You know, the how is always my sort of thing. So the how he's delivering, thanks to having relaxed about his subject and gone, you know, the workshops combined with ditching. You know, going almost virtual monochrome. None of them are actual monochrome. They're pretty much two, and there are some exceptions. I just find completely fantastic.
You're quite attracted to that monochrome kind of vibe.
Well, I don't know why, and I don't know whether it's me, but there's something about when work is very busy. Because he is a master of his own technique. When work is very busy in various, which can be colour, can be detail, somehow here, when he's putting down some of his sort of mechanisms, which were colour or sort of very, very lovely, polite landscapes, which are beautiful, became, or they remained more pictorial than what's happening now.
Oh, I see.
One somehow enters into them. And I've spent a long time thinking of why, and there isn't an answer. Probably 10 different people who love a given painting would have different answers, hopefully. But that is the strength of good artwork, a good book, a good film, everything.
Maybe the monochrome gives them a seriousness or intellectual. I find it interesting how paintings communicate things like that in the way they're made.
Yes, and it's also this particular, something to do with the light, both the light and the acidity,
the acidity,
the lemony thing, and it's the light mixed with the transparency. That that this technique offers, and that he's absolutely wallowing in, and that is regardless of whether he's building a painting, or building an image in the painting, or trying to wash it off. It works. It's that kind of moment.
So 25 years. So what inspired you to kick off the gallery in the first place 25 years ago?
At a very personal issue. I've never studied anything visual, but have probably like a lot of children, growing up in very visually engaged families. I've been carted around to galleries. I was quite convinced that the Tate was a place when I was little, it was a place you took your kids to without asking them when it was raining. And so, but the huge, growing up in the huge revival, or the huge acknowledgement of whatever art was, making it less of a niche interest, is a privilege. And my own personal interest, having lived pretty much next to the Royal College pretty much all my life until I moved here, was a complete curiosity. Every single year I've been to every single degree show since I was 13.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
I'm now 68, I think, and intense curiosity when there's always one or two people are focusing on, and I was always a little bit a contrarian, and it's the questions, wondering why and how, and also. The other thing I like is, my own personal hobby is, or interest in visual art, because my gallery works across all media.
Sure. So sculpture as well as...
Sculpture, film, I've done...
film as well, nice.
Oh, quite a lot.
Okay.
The only thing I've totally abandoned is live art, and I won't do dead artists. So in between live art and dead artists, it's everything else. And there's plenty of people who do all of that. And because the event is less interesting to me. Events obviously are important, but for me it's less interesting than the work itself. And as important as what we are doing now is building an audience, communicating, get good writing, and all of that. It's still, the actual ambition is a painting, a sculpture, anything holds everything that is trying to be and say and do in itself, which is still my great ambition.
I think it's really interesting actually that if you went to all those Royal College of Art shows, you got much more exposure to lesser known artists, as it were, than most people would do. So because in a way, say if you normally go to the Tate, you end up seeing quite a narrow view of chosen artists to a degree. But it almost makes me feel that you almost got quite a lucky way of being exposed to all sorts of different things.
It's lucky, yes. It's not privileged, in that the real privilege for all of us is art is just about the only thing, other than going to parks, we can all do for free. And
that's
also,
true.
A, all do for free, and B, not having to know anything. Clearly one can know everything, and one can search out. Well, you know, but both the institutions in this country, I think, are probably the only museums anywhere in the world and galleries that you can literally go in and see quite a lot for free. And that allows a certain, you know, it's actually wonderful, even if you work in art, to go along to a museum and see a show where you know absolutely nothing about whether it's a historical show or indeed a gallery, or whether it's a British Museum type show. To, you know, to go and know nothing is wonderful, and then start thinking about how and what it, you know, rather than knowing, and then allowing the work to make you curious to know more. And that's wonderful.
I think
I do that, and I didn't only go to the Royal College.
No. I just meant, I mean, you got a good exposure to
I basically
all sorts of things.
got off the bus coming back from school and wondered what all those people were doing walking into a building.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
And so I got off and walked into the building.
That's really cool.
Exactly, so that's how that started. But then you find out there are lots of other places that you can do that.
Well, what I really like actually is when I set up the Art Top 10, what I was particularly passionate about was people should not have to feel they need to know anything about art to go and look at it. Because I know I've got a lot of friends.
I agree.
Who are like, oh, I feel there's like a secret code or a secret language. And the whole point of Art Top 10 was to say, well, there's no secret code or secret language. It's your opinion is as valid as absolutely anybody else's in the world.
And even with people who know an awful lot, even within, let's say, one subject within art, you know, the strength of a good work, to some extent, is a lot of people having opinions but disagreeing with each other and being able to say why, you know, beyond the I like it, I don't like it, or all of that rubbish. That is interesting. And I do think one of my, I don't have an English background at all, and I think I've always thought that one of the strengths of the art scene in the UK that started definitely later than the rest of Europe, obviously there are exceptions, but I've always thought that the strength of the history and acknowledgement of language in English, almost like being haunted by Shakespeare, and I love Shakespeare, but how the way we think of language as the preeminent cultural and writing and books, and not just theatre, and communicating is somehow knocked back art, which is now going, oi. You know, has been for about 60 years now.
No, I totally agree. The English culture is so based towards written stuff.
And it's
they're not very good at looking at a picture without having something written about it.
Well, there's a sort of, as you said, lack of trust, as if one ought to know, or are pictures for people who can't read. And
that's good. Actually, I think lack of trust is a really good phrase. Or also something to do with a skill set, i.e. a craft. And there's nothing that isn't a skill set, you know, from baking or what you're doing. So that's another thing to chuck out. But it is fascinating. That's cool.
Yeah.
So what was your very first show?
Oh gosh. The first show I'm remembering, they're pretty much all on my website. I've done as many outside the gallery as in. The first show that I'm remembering, because it's an eye burner, it's a sort of definite retina sort of virus, is an artist who went to the Slade, who's called Paula Mettler, who made large black and white photographs.
Oh, right, wow.
And they were, I can see them now in this room, and they're not, obviously, and outside, and they were, it was called Vis-a-Vis, and she now lives in Berlin, and it was a sort of deconstruction of a formal Victorian group photo of a bunch of women. I can't remember, school or whatever, but you know, all wearing black dresses and black and white photography, and quite formally posed, one with a book, one on chairs. So it was a deconstruction, or rather a recreation of individual photos of people that referenced the poses and the stance in that in the original group photo. So it wasn't a group photo, and they were rather large. I used to call them the scary ladies.
The scary ladies.
Especially the one that was there. But it was fantastic. And both as a work in itself, collectively and individual, and as a kind of, not an activation space. I enjoy the fact that this building is kind of fairly old and scruffy. Definitely not domestic. Built basically, and always was, offices, predominantly law, but not only. The Inland Revenue was in here at one point, and something called the African Inland Mission, and lots of things.
Lots of things,
Pizza Express was founded on the top floor.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, that's crazy.
And all of that. So, you know, like a lot of places in London where we think we know what they do, but behind doors in essentially a business district dominated by law, there's all sorts.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, it's fascinating.
And so the fact that it's slightly not a showroomy, you can't see anything from the street, which gives you the freedom to create a vibe. It gives you the freedom to... and the fact that the building's the wrong way round, I don't know whether you've noticed.
I didn't realise.
Well, you know, it is the wrong way, is what I call the wrong, because the staircase is at the front.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And the full width rooms are at the back. In other words, that for some reason that gives even more freedom to encompass more of the space. Because sometimes, I mean, Graham's show, a monographic show, obviously, is another particular challenge, because the last thing you want is like rows of stuff bunched up.
Exactly.
While you want to emphasize consistency and practice. So that's, you know, so we've played with it differently on the stairs, as we have here, as you've noticed, hopefully.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant. So when you did that first exhibition, was the plan to go long term, or was that just a sort of reckless moment?
I think so. I can't remember. I was very keen. I'm not particularly interested in architecture per se. I mean, I love it. Some of my best friends are architects, but I'm not particularly interested in this or that style. I more wanted to go away from spaces that looked a bit like car showrooms, because everyone else is doing that, and it amused me that you know, people go to Venice and show in totally falling down palazzos and go wow, and then come here and it's all glass and white. So I was particularly interested in, and also it's still very much well, something I'm very fond of is I have a particular kind of like interest in that really good art you can show anywhere. But you have to, but clearly the challenge is to make it work, in order for people to see the work, and the sort of expected criteria of if a gallery ain't white, how could it be contemporary art in it, is obviously a little bit narrow.
So you were having a little jab at that kind of white cube idea to a degree, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly, because I kind of admire what any gallery that survives does.
Exactly.
And, you know, like in any profession, you go around grumbling at everyone else. I'm sure Marilyn Monroe grumbled at everyone.
Oh, I bet, man. I bet.
And at the same time, you don't want sameness everywhere. And every single artist I work with works in very different spaces, and very often temporary spaces.
And how do you choose your artists? Do you?
I never look for them. And I never meet the person first.
You never meet them?
Well, I do meet them, but I don't meet the person before being interested, thinking about the work, not thinking about, I never really look for a painter or a sculptor or something big or little or whatever it is. I tend to look for, that started actually when I was a teenager going around degree shows. You very often, or I do, you very often go around somewhere and you go, oh, that's lovely, don't like that. And that's but afterwards, you're not necessarily thinking about the work you thought you were most interested in at the time. So there's an awful lot of
weird stuff in your head.
Something that's embedded in me that won't leave me, even when I didn't. At first, it was like, well, what's that? And simply because. And then going back and checking, and very often things you really admire, if you're not thinking about them later, how could I act as an interlocutor, intermediate? I mean, what have I got to give, or anyone like me, or anyone who genuinely doesn't respond to something? What's the point?
Yeah, it's interesting actually.
So I use that as my personal litmus, but then it then starts this other.
So most of the people you've tended to see their pieces one way or another for over a period of time, have you, before you'd do anything with them?
Yes, not always.
Not always, no.
But certainly there's the anchoring point in what becomes a process of thinking and discovering and seeing whether, it's one work or seeing whether there's more and what that artist is doing and who they are and all that kind of thing.
So are you out and about at lots of different shows, sort of? Prowling around for the good stuff.
It's easy to do. In the middle of London, it's like the geography of where people are has shifted. But it's just a bit to the right and a bit to the left. And, people come and go. But even galleries that come and go, you very often see the same faces in another context.
Yes.
So it's actually very, very easy.
It's quite interesting actually.
Absolutely.
So over that time, there must have been highs and lows of the whole thing. Have you ever wanted to give it all up, or?
Not really.
Not really, you haven't.
Galleries tend to have more artists than artists have galleries.
Oh, yeah.
And that can be quite useful. I've always had, for example, I've got my next 4 shows.
Oh, you have? All planned?
Yeah.
Nice.
2 of them are on my website already.
Okay.
Not with precise dates, just the months.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 shows and then 1 or 2 in next immediately after the new year.
Oh, nice. So you're quite organised.
Yes, and clearly when you work with people, there's a different criteria. It's development in their practice, it's opportunities because of something that's happening somewhere else. Or
there's all sorts of things.
There are, it's sort of like, I suppose all of that's common sense. No particular strategic plan there. It's what makes sense most. Definitely.
So if you don't meet the artist until you've kind of decided you like the work, sometimes do you meet them and they're completely insane?
I'm not very good at detecting insanity at an early stage.
At an early stage,
So, but no, clearly it's a process of do I think I could work with this person, and could this person work with me? And what in any industry you get a feeling of that's one thing one looks for. Whether they might be interested in what other plans they've got, if any. To start with artists, as indeed the example when I started a gallery, as indeed the example I gave you, Paula Mettler, who were graduating around that time. And one of my interests in that was genuinely feeling freer to look in degree shows than you were in other galleries that already had an imprint without me fully understanding what that imprint was. It seemed to be that was already happening, and as you said earlier, the relatively narrow range which one sees, be it in museums or galleries, it does live a lot unshown. So it was a combination of my own interests, where I understood things might be going, and giving that a go. And since then, I have worked with some, I don't know what the word is, more mature, older.
Okay,
Hopefully wiser artists.
Wiser.
Hear that, everyone.
That's good.
But it is still, without exception, it's the work that somehow has to trigger that curiosity first.
So would you say there is a kind of theme to the things you've done over the 25 years?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. It's true, people have said you can tell a Domo Baal artist.
Oh, really?
I don't know whether that's a compliment or an insult. But I don't know. I don't tend to follow trends, or I don't tend to follow trends in lots of things, not just art, in kind of, getting dressed or makeup or nail varnish or cars, you name it. And because I'm not bothered, but I, when I'm interested. But some of the artists, I have to say, which is a virtue of their practice, and we're talking of very, very different types of people, ages, and completely different mediums, where when one's graduating, whether as an artist or when one is starting a gallery, one has no real idea of what happens next, how it happens next, what the other mechanisms are, what mechanisms you engage with, what is useful. And so some of them have done very, very well, bless them, and are doing very well. And this is regardless of whether it's someone who's just graduated, or whether, I'm thinking of Maud Cotter, for example, who I showed last, who is a lady approximately Graham's age, which means they were above me in school. So I would have had to be polite to them. And she's Irish. This is a good example, which means she lives and works in Ireland. I'm not talking about identity, just practicalities here. And I had seen her work quite a lot through other gallery art fairs and things like that. And it had always left me curious, and always and I'm not really bothered. I neither liked it or disliked it. It was like, what on earth is that?
And so it's a curiosity.
What is it? And what is it? And then I saw her work, which is again the importance, despite the understandable narrow focus of institutions, and they have to, because the most important thing is that they do focus, and focus is always a little bit narrow. It has to be, otherwise there is no focus. When I finally saw a large institutional show of hers, because at the same time, simultaneously an artist that I was working in, Lothar Goetz, working with, was showing in the same institution, which was the MAC Belfast in Northern Ireland, a beautiful building. Suddenly something clicked.
Interesting.
And I'd never met her, didn't really know who she was or where she lived. I knew it was somewhere in Ireland, and our relationship started at that point, although she was probably well into her 60s by then, and probably, or around about that, I don't know. And we've done quite a lot, including international shows.
I like the way the curiosity drives you.
Yes, the curiosity, one side of the seesaw, bloody-mindedness on the other.
What more do you need? So what would you say to somebody who wanted to set up a gallery? What advice would you give them? I think you said you do professional practice teaching and things like that. But
that came after running a gallery. The only advice I would give, that I can give, which I would probably give in any subject, is go and look. Don't just look on the internet or think about, and be curious and ask questions. Clearly internships, I say that in some of my professional practice things, clearly internships are very useful, but only for a short time.
Interesting.
Because there is a demand, but it's just like the minute you've learned something, you know, the way you've changed careers several times, and it is all theoretical until one's feet is in the door. And how does one know if it's the people or the kind of way, the thinking map of that career? And so just go and look and do it, and you'll know.
You'll know. Did you know you want to be a gallerist, or did it just sort of evolve out?
A little bit. I did spend my junior school years doing my homework on the floor of the ICA with other people going, shh, and...
That's interesting.
And it used to annoy me when people went on and on about something that I thought was obviously rubbish, even though I was 6 and 7. And what annoyed me more was when I found something quite interesting that everyone else seemed to be ignoring.
Interesting.
And so it's basically the thinking and the questions. There isn't a right and wrong.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And so, like artists talk about making as thinking as doing, it's not that different, I think, whether for curators or gallerists. That there might well be a different strategy, you know, such as I'm going to open a, gallery that's only, to paraphrase the current phase, you know, only for animals or only for plants or only for... That's fine, but then at least know your subject, and be curious about it.
Yeah, be curious. Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of them, because I suppose that a lot of the gallerists you do come across actually seem to be business people who've happened to open a gallery.
Well,
or as an artist, that's the way you experience them.
Well spotted. I mean, some of them are people who started out as artists.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So first of all that tells us is a lot more skills are needed than if you're just a business person. You know, what is the business? So yes, but that probably goes for absolutely everything. If you're running a restaurant, obviously it's good if you're into good cooking, but managing people has to be another priority. So it is probably, yes, that's another thing about having there's a Vogue, that's been going on for some time actually. Graham was also involved. There's a lot of artists. There are quite a lot of artist groups who set up. And you can't do that with food, not in quite that way. You certainly can't do that with architecture. And so to some extent there is a luck that you can have if you're resourceful enough. If you club together with like-minded people, preferably with different skills, like one good with the drill and the other one good with the lights or whatever it is, you can do things, and therefore you learn. And some of the, one of the biggest galleries in the world started out on that footing, artist-run space.
Interesting, isn't it?
But as you said, the ones that one sees tend to be like, and I think in the art world that we all see, as you said, the kind of privileged spaces of the Tate and places like that, we all seem to think that you do a lovely painting or a lovely sculpture. Or a great film for that, and there is a queue round the block, and one has yet to see a queue round the block. They have them at the local cake shop.
And
the doing is so important, and it's only the doing that leads to something.
I don't know. Actually, just probably sort of rounding up, but certainly from my experience of an artist, I'd say, well, I've been doing it for about 20 years or something, but there are so many artists now. So just an extraordinary amount of.
Yes.
Have you must have, I mean.
Yes. I mean, presumably part of that is because, as you say, you've been doing it for 20 years. The more you work in an area, probably a medic would say the same thing, that, you tend to meet more people who are within the same Venn diagram.
I suppose there's a degree
possibly,
of that.
But I do also agree that the expansion of the universities and the fact that the universities are, I could rant, You know, that the artists, the people that go there are their clients, and there is a lot of demand for people wanting to be creative, not just through art, through lots of things. And so that has expanded indeed, which kind of obviously makes it harder because there's more competitive. On the one hand, it means that there's more visual awareness out there.
That's an interesting.
To go back to our early conversation, there's more like, you know, probably everyone knows what art is when I don't know that people outside are. You know, they thought it was a Turner or a Monet, but not, you know, is someone doing it today? Or a skill set. Probably there's more general awareness.
That's actually a really interesting positive to take out of it. I hope. I feel that, but I don't know, you know. But yes, no, it is tricky. On the other hand, I've never regarded doing art. I sort of slightly shy away from the word training, and my own experience, also the way I was brought up, is there very, very few educations, probably only medicine, law, and architecture, and some science subjects, not all, that are training in the literal sense, to having to begin, and everything else is very, very important educationally, but is essentially thinking using that framework, which can then take one into different fields. You know, just as, and I think that, which doesn't mean it's, it just means that it doesn't mean that 1 + 1 = 2. It's more complex than that. Both fortunately and less fortunately and unfortunately. No, well, I've really enjoyed chatting, actually. I think it's been really nice to actually talk. I mean, you feel like...
What's your favourite painting? That's what I want to know.
Oh, in the world?
No, not in the world, in this world. In this world.
100% without a doubt, but this one.
Really? Okay, why?
Oh, I think it's just so unbelievably striking. And
I love it too.
Incredibly, it's got such clarity to it and focus. And I love those beautiful big yellow strips. And for me, you're almost floating in space. There's no floor like the others have to a degree. You're in this sort of extraordinary, not a void, but it's reflective and it's...
It is. It's like you're looking through some sort of mirror thing. I agree. I love that one. And even the doubling, you know, the double light, the double chair, the double stool. Is it a mirror? Are there two?
It's beautiful.
No, and the scale of it means you get even more cadmium, which is pushing the light out at you. No, I agree. I love
that one.
That's why we made it into a beer mat. We had no choice.
That beer mat is brilliant.
That painting can take it. Even though we had to chop it up, obviously, because it's not the size
of the size of a beer mat. Domo, I really enjoyed chatting. Thanks so much. It was really nice to chat to somebody who's really into their art, basically.
Thank you.
Lovely.
It's a pleasure.